Hello and welcome to Office Hours, episode number 12. We have a dozen episodes. We have one episode for every donut in a box. Unless your donut shop is one of those awesome ones that just gives you a free one because you're cool. Mine is not. Now I want a donut. Instead of a donut, though, I have this, and I have you. And I'd rather have that than all the donuts in China. So hi everybody, welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to be focusing on some broader questions about the GM art. We're going to be taking a bit of a step back from the rule book. We're going to be taking a bit of a step back from the character sheet and the dice, and we're going to talk about some of the kind of higher strata stuff, some of the weird social stuff that can come up, and the stuff that falls on the shoulders of the GM 9 times out of 10, because for some reason that's just how it goes in role-playing games sometimes. We have this tendency as game masters to be seen as the authority on both that which exists within the game universe and all the shit at the table and the players and the food at the game and the when to arrive. And so we'll talk about some issues today that are related to those things, but keep in mind that in my mind, those things are not the responsibility of the GM. So first and foremost, above and beyond all the other things we're going to talk about today, as a game master, you are only responsible for the things that the game you are playing says you're responsible for. So even if the rest of your players are like, Adam, it's game night, where's the pizza, buddy? You can be like, I'm sorry, where in this role-playing game does it say that I'm responsible for pizza? Unless you're playing a role-playing game that says you're responsible for pizza, in which case, well, you goofed because you forgot the pizza. Also, maybe don't play that game. I don't know if that game exists, but don't play it. So, what is Office Hours? In case you are visiting us, you're joining us for the very first time, just to lay it out there, here on the 12th anniversary, I guess an anniversary is a year, the 12th episode anniversary of Office Hours. Office Hours is a show in which I sit down, all dressed up, and I talk to you about my feelings and thoughts about questions you have about game mastering tabletop role-playing games. If you don't know what tabletop role-playing games are, this might be slightly more advanced for you, but hey, sit that butt down. I'm glad you're here. Stick around. So, if you want to get involved, you can go to my website, www.adam-koble.com/office-hours, and there's a nice little form there. You can fill it out, and you can be like, Adam, my quandary, my game mastering quandary, please help me. And hopefully I will be able to do that for you. So, today's questions begin with a social issue at games that can sometimes feel like a GM issue. This one, there's some hurt feelings that come along with this one. So if your feels are hurt by this, you are not alone. Here's our question to begin the episode.
Hey Adam, my name is Ronan. I go by Just Wait and See on Twitch, and I had a question relating to players. How do you keep player attention on the game and away from outside distractions, such as players being on phones or handheld gaming devices like a 3DS or anything like that? Thank you for your time, really big fan of your DM style, and have an awesome day.
So, you've got your mega dungeon all sorted out, everybody's made characters, you're sitting down to play, and you begin describing the beautiful terrors that you've prepared for your players. You've created an environment of such raw adversarial torment that they can only but sit in moist terror of what grim fate is to come them. And you know what? One of them's looking at their phone, and another one's flipping through the rule book trying to decide what skills to buy. And maybe two of the other players are looking at you. Maybe one of them's got that glassy tunnel vision player look on their face, and you're like, damn, kids. Damn, my GM feelings. I spent time and energy and maybe money on this adventure, and why are you doing this to me? Why are you not listening to my magnum opus? Why are you not moist with terror? And this hurts, right? This can feel bad for you. So before we get into the question itself, because I know that this is a thing that people worry about, and GMs feel like it's their responsibility alone to worry about it. But before we get into it, there's stuff happening on top of the game you're playing, right? Maybe in some lawful neutral universe, there's games in which the only thing that exists at the table is the game and the rules of the game. But that we don't live in that universe. Me and you, and you, and you, and you, we all play in a world where we are human beings first and players of games second. And human beings interact on this social level regardless of what they're doing. And this can contain, like we said, this can contain things like when to show up for the game. Is it okay to be 10 minutes late? Is it not okay? Do you show up 10 minutes early so that, bang, as soon as it's high noon, we start playing? This is things like, where do we play every week? Do we rotate whose house we play at? What is or isn't okay to bring along to that house, right? Like, if you're playing at someone's house, it might be okay to bring, like, your dog. If you're playing at my house, don't do that, please. But it might be okay to bring your dog to the game. It's probably never okay to bring, like, a loaded firearm to the game. Definitely don't do that. I don't care whose house you're at. You know, this stuff exists above the game layer. And it's important when we talk about role-playing games because I think that role-playing games are probably as close to that social layer. There's like a micron of space right there. It's probably as close to that social layer as you're going to get without just sitting around having a conversation with your friends, right? It's a structured conversation about a specific topic, and social aspects of how you converse with your friends, or the players, hopefully they're your friends, can make a game more fun or not fun at all, depending on the degrees of the game and how much that social stuff works or doesn't work, how much it clicks. And because we're all people before we come to the table, because we're all human beings, well, maybe you're an elf. If you're an elf, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but we're all people, and we're bringing our people stuff to the game. This social layer is filled with the stuff, and before you start playing the game, nobody's the game master, right? So we're all responsible for being committed to making the social contract at the table work well, right? Work all that stuff out at the table. Do it smoothly. Communicate when you feel like the social layer is getting fucked up. So this isn't a GMing question. This is a player question, but I'm answering it on office hours because so often people expect that the GM will handle this shit. Right? Like if your player is, you've got a player that's always distracted, always looking at their phone, playing video games while you're playing D&D, whatever, people look to the GM and be like, fix it. Come on. They would never speak up because, I mean, in this hypothetical group, that's how it goes. So, okay. I'm going to go ahead and take like kind of a weird stance on this one, and I'm going to try to explain it. But with the caveat that this is my opinion and that yours might vary, and we'll talk about how this is a personal thing in a second. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing when players are not 100% focused on a game. Nor do I think it indicates that the GM is doing a bad job if that happens, or inherently there's a problem at all. Right? Now, just wait and see. Asked this question because they feel like there is a problem. But I'm saying that for your group, this may not be the case. I think there's going to be a lot of diverse opinions about this, and I want to dig into it a little, but I think it's worth knowing whether or not for the person who is seeming to be distracted, whether it's about them or about you that this is a problem, right? The way that we all engage with games and the way we feel about how other people engage with them is a very personal thing, and it can vary. So my feelings might be different from yours, might be different from someone else, commenting about the episode. So keep that in mind. Something I think that you can do to help work this stuff out first, before you start talking to people, before you consider changing groups, before any of that stuff happens, is understand why we feel the need to fix this problem in the first place, right? So do we feel like we're not being heard when we describe something and somebody's looking at their phone? Is that why? Do you feel like they're just not hearing you? It's a basic human need, right? To communicate and to be heard. Do you feel like it's negatively impacting their choices in sort of team effort situations? Are the other players getting irritated because they don't know what's going on. They're not keeping up with the narrative, right? Is it slowing the game down when everybody needs to be working together? This is the classic example of, it gets all the way around the turn order, and now it's, Johnny's turn, and Johnny's like, wait, hold on. I was looking at the rule book. What happened? Where am I? Okay, why do I only have 6 hit points? What? Okay. So, there's a couple of reasons why this can be a problem. And as a GM, this can commonly be a hard thing to handle when you feel like the stuff that you're making up, the effort you've put into the game, isn't being acknowledged. But that isn't always the case if someone's distracted with something else, right? Start with you, right? Start inside. Start understanding what about it bothers you, and really dig into that, right? Figure out why it makes you feel frustrated. Is it a game level thing? Is it a personal thing? Is your feelings hurt? Where are you at in that space? And that's where you're going to start to work from when you want to address this issue. So once you've kind of got that figured out, look into the behavior itself, right? There's a difference between being distracted from a game in progress and casually devoting your attention to like other stuff when you're not needed, right? There's questions of duration, questions of context, the game itself and how it's structured. Like, for example, when you're playing a game, does it feel more or less annoying to you if someone looks at their phone versus flipping through an RPG book? If it's the player's handbook for the game, is that more or less annoying than them looking at their phone? If it's a rule book for a different game, more or less annoying, right? Does that feel irritating for you? Right? Okay. What if it's during a scene when the character isn't present, right? Does it bother you if I check my email when my character is asleep, right? Does it bother you if I'm mentally alt-tabbed during a scene where I'm just not around? In a game that's very structured, say, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, does it bother you when a player is not paying attention when it's someone else's turn, right? And if you're noticing the behavior happening a lot, and it's frustrating you or bothering you, or you've got an idea of why it annoys you, you can see some patterns, don't hesitate to ask privately the player about it, right? And try to frame this as a conversation about your feelings, not a conversation about their behavior, right? Don't start this conversation by saying, you're doing a thing and it's bugging me. Try saying something like, hey, I've been feeling a little like the game isn't super grabby for your attention. I wanted to check in and see if you're still having a good time, you're still feeling bought in. How's the game going for you? You digging it? Right? And more often than not, this is enough for people to fess up, right? And say something like, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of distracted today. I'm having a fight with my boyfriend, or my dog is sick, or I'm having a hard time at work and I'm doing all these overtime projects. If there's a reason that they're distracted that is about the real world and is pulling them out of the game, this is the time where they'll probably mention there's something going on, right? So if there is a reason, and maybe it's something, personal, and maybe they don't want to give you the details, but if they can say something is going on, then thank them for sharing that. Be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. There's context now. And, it's a little distracting for me. Let them know that you're feeling affected by their behavior. You're struggling a bit, and that you're feeling like your fun is being diminished, or maybe your feelings are hurt. Try to express that, right? Because the clearer you can be about that, the better. If they can point to a reason, that can often be enough, right? It'll get better. Or maybe they need to take a break from the game. It can open the doors for that conversation. But if they can't point to a reason, sometimes just letting them know that their actions are making the game less fun for you will help, and they're going to change their behavior. Now, don't tell them this because you want them to change. Don't expressing your feelings with the expectation that someone else will listen to that and change their behavior is a good way to get your feelings hurt even worse and to breed resentment and frustration, right? Just because you tell someone, hey, I feel sad when you do this, doesn't mean they're going to just stop doing the thing that makes you feel bad, right? So be clear And that's more often than not the way to get things changed, right? Be clear. Say, do you mind trying the next session with your phone off, right? Can we like just we'll all just put our phones in the middle of the table and nobody I've played games with, and I know a lot of people who are in jobs with very bad work-life balance. And so for those groups, we started a rule that when we started a game, everybody put their phone face down in the middle of the table in a pile, and nobody was allowed to touch them, right? That was just, we had all agreed that they were all out in the open. No one could fiddle with them. Emails could wait, and we would take regular breaks so people could check in on their work, right? It's a thing. You can mitigate that stuff. So anyway, ask them, right? Ask them if they would mind doing that, because it is affecting your fun, and you have a right to advocate for the things that you enjoy in a game. We've talked about that before. Let them respond honestly and give them some time, because people tend to get defensive when they feel like someone is telling them their behavior is wrong. I mean, think about it. Think about times you've criticized people or asked them to change or expressed that their behavior is hurting you. Just like think about that, and think about how many times people were defensive. So let that happen. People respond emotionally to stuff like that. It's hard to feel criticized. Let that happen. Don't get angry about it. Give it some time to percolate. This is why we have these conversations at the end of a session, not at the beginning, not in the middle. You know, like let it ride until there's a point where you can say, hey, let's have this talk. Okay, cool. See you next week. Right? And if you don't feel comfortable having the talk face to face, like you can email them. It's okay. That's not passive aggressive, as long as you word it correctly, which is to say sensitively and not being a jerk about it. But like, listen to what your players say. So here's where I'm going to say maybe you're wrong about getting upset about this. I know. I'm just hear me out. So invite your players to give you feedback on what might be causing the issue, but also keep in mind that it might not be an issue, right? They might say to you, oh no, I'm totally tuned in. I am super having fun. I'm paying attention. And it might mean they're, telling you the truth about their experience. Right? I've played in games with folks who have all kinds of different ways of engaging with games, with different ways of thinking, right? We're not all the same. Neurodiversity is a thing. People have mental health stuff going on that might make it hard for them to outwardly seem like they're paying a lot of attention. They might prefer to draw while they play, or flip through a rule book, or look stuff up on Wikipedia, and that's okay, right? Like, you gotta respect other people's ways of engaging with the game and recognize that they might be struggling with stuff too, right? And honestly, like, if it feels like, even though that's the case, if it feels like there's some disruption going on or whatever, just talk to the group, talk to the players, talk to the other person. And you might get to a point where they just don't engage in the game in the way that you feel is best for your group, right? Sometimes people don't fit. And we might feel like sometimes we have to take what we can get when it comes to players. You might live in a small town. God knows I did. And you might think, oh shit, these are the only people in town who play role-playing games. But that's becoming less and less of an issue. I mean, here we are on the internet talking about role-playing games. There's space for that. And you should play with people whose playstyle matches your own. Right? So treat your players like humans, respect and listen to what they tell you, and don't force something that doesn't need to be forced. But let me just say before we move on to the next question, do not pull bullshit GM tricks. Don't punish them in game for not doing what you want. Like, that is some shit. Do not do that, right? I'll sometimes see this come up in other venues of GM advice where people will say like, oh, my players aren't paying attention. What should I do? And people are like, I don't know, just like hit him with a red dragon. Just fuck him up with a fireball. Yeah, that'll get him to pay attention. Kill their character. Just stab their character in the face and be like, oh, you weren't paying attention. I took away your toys. Don't do that. Don't be an asshole. That shit does not fly. You're not responsible for disciplining your players. We're not authoritarian overlords here, kids. We're players in a game, and we're people, and hierarchy blows, even at the game table. So don't do that. Talk to your players. Anyway, so yeah, player distraction. So let's amp it up. We're gonna amp it up. So you think that's awkward? You're gonna talk about some serious awkward shit. Okay, so this is a question about what can often be either like a minor annoyance or like a completely game destroying problem. Everybody who GMs eventually runs into this issue. It's a tough one. Here it comes.
Hey Adam, my name's Clayton, also known as IcePhantom7 on Twitch. You may have seen me around, may not have. But my question centers around player versus player conflict. So last week I was playing a game of Stars Without Number, and a thing happened. One character decided it would be a good idea to steal the ship, locked himself in the bridge and stole the ship. We got in there eventually, and as soon as the door opened, one character turned to me and said, "I'm going to shoot this other character." Now the character that stole the ship the player that stole the ship got really angry, made a big scene, and just left. Rage quit on the spot. So my question to you is, what do you do when PvP happens? How do you handle player versus player conflict? What do you do when a player says, "Hey, I'm a PC, you can't do that"?
Hey, I'm a PC. You can't do that. Not in my town. Not on my character sheet. Yeah, God, nothing fucks up a game worse than unexpected player versus player content. Nothing does it worse than unexpected and poor rules to manage PvP content. It is a rough scene. But I'm gonna blow your mind. You ready? Get out your mind protecting gear, because all conflict in role playing games is PvP. Yeah, all of it. Yeah, it's fucked up, right? Because GMs are players too. But what we're talking about here specifically is non-GM player versus player conflict. And player conflict can be either like super fun or like pure fucking horror, right? Like as a GM, it can be like, oh shit, this is gonna be great. I can like take a back seat, I can just calm the fuck down, and I can not have to do anything. And for the next hour, these two are gonna have a battle, and it's gonna be about them. And all I have to do is just like watch, and oh my god, it's great. But it can also be like, okay, the players are fighting, and they're looking at, Papa GM to like resolve it and to like break your innate neutrality as the GM, which sacrosanct. Like, we'll talk about bias in a second. But so we're going to talk our way through this, and we're going to try to figure out a way to help get you to a place where when it comes up, PvP is not pure horror, but is instead an interesting, fun thing to have happen in your role-playing games. It is possible. I had it happen to me recently. It was a good time. So, okay. So why does player-player conflict come up in games? Why does that happen? Why can't we all just agree to just like agree? Why can't we play a game by committee and just do that? So even when we're all on the same team, right? Which when we're talking about role-playing games is always 100% of the time, we're always on the same team. We can sometimes disagree about the direction that the team should go, or how the team should be run, or what the goals of our team are, even if we're all playing the same game. And sometimes, even though we're on a team, we feel the need to assert our uniqueness, to say, yes, I am on this team, but also I am me, and I get to have a character who does my own stuff on my own. I don't care what you think. I'm doing this. And honestly, sometimes the characters have goals that are just in conflict with each other. That's just a thing that happens. There's character adversariality that occurs in games, and some games flat out encourage this. They make us wave huge colored banners that say, my character is this way, and I am opposed to all characters who are this other way, or any other way, like alignment, right? And we can lose sight of the fact sometimes that our characters are not merely lawful neutral, but we are people. We are characters with depth and interesting stuff going on that isn't just, I am a big gray flag of lawful neutrality, right? So it's not just about that. And honestly, sometimes this shit can come from that social layer that we've talked about a little bit, right? Sometimes this stuff can come from players who don't like each other. I know. Sometimes people play games with people they don't like. It's fucked up, but it's real. I'm sorry to have to break your heart and inform you of that. Sometimes it's just the players don't like each other, or they're having a beef in real life, or something like that, right? Like, that happens. Sometimes people just are having a shitty day, and like, so many people do, so many people do, they're taking it out on the people near and dear to them, right? So it's like, my boss yelled at me. Well, fuck you, I don't want to go to the dungeon. I'm going to join the Thieves Guild, and I'm going to make the GM tell a different story for the game than we were going to do, and it's going to be all about me because I need some me time, right? Like, people lash out, and that happens. But I think, and I'm gonna maybe rehash something. I'm gonna talk about a thing that I think I've probably talked about before. We're gonna talk about the Nuremberg defense, because I think that more often than not, PvP in games is justified by that infinitely horseshit stance of, this is what my character would do. So, you know what? I don't care if I've talked about the Nuremberg defense of gaming before. We're going to talk about it again because I fucking hate it, and you should never do it. So, the Nuremberg defense of gaming is when someone does something shitty in the game, something disruptive, something mean, something counter to the fun of everyone else at the table, and they point to their character sheet and they say, well, it's what my character would have done. I'm doing this because my character is an asshole. I'm not an asshole, you see. It's just I play one in Dungeons and Dragons. So, I mean, fuck them, for one. That's a really shitty thing to do. Do not stand behind your character as a justification for you being an asshat. That's not okay. Yes, immersion is a thing that people care about, and yes, feeling like you are doing things in accordance with your idea of your character can feel like you are playing the role-playing game for real, but it often leads to shitty behavior, and then people respond, and then there's fighting, and it becomes not just about my character wants X and your character wants Y. It becomes player X is being a douchebag, and player Y is angry about it, but has no other recourse but to fight them in-game. Fight me in-game, right? So I think that like a lot of this stuff can be resolved by a couple practical steps. Just like little things you can do. So if you have a group where you have experience with PvP and this group before, you know they like to get at each other's throats, that's a thing they enjoy, pick a game that fits this kind of thing, right? Some games have explicit mechanisms for resolving character-to-character conflict directly. The Duel of Wits in Burning Wheel was written, it was created as a rule, not so that player characters could argue about things, but so that players would have recourse when their characters disagreed, right? This is a mechanical thing that was created. The advent of this mechanical thing is to keep PvP constrained into a fun, fair part of gameplay. Manipulation in Apocalypse World, right? Manipulation says, if I succeed at this roll, carrot, stick, both, there's the rules. Play by them, right? So that happens. There are rules set out for that. Sometimes games make non-GM inter-character conflict fun and exciting. Some games don't approach it at all, in which case you have to look at it as treat this conflict the same as you would treat any other conflict in the game. And that's where it gets a little hairy, right? Now, games that don't have that stuff, we can compensate. So you want to boil down bad feelings PvP. You want to talk about a game, and I'm not gonna get away from RPGs even altogether, right? You ever played Diplomacy? You nerds know what Diplomacy is? You heard of that game? So, Diplomacy is infamous. And I think, personally, based on my experience with it, it might be like a little overblown. But Diplomacy is infamous as a friendship killer. Because it's a game in which you play one of the powers engaged in World War I, and the entire game is secrecy and conflict and backstabbing and fucking over your friends. It's all PvP, and you can do some really, really mean shit in that game to get what you want, right? To win, you almost have to say, oh, hey, don't worry, Russia. Your good buddy Austria-Hungary has got your back. It's me, Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary's got your back, and we are going to back you up. And then you go over to Germany, and you're like, yo, Germany, man, was it Russia or a bunch of chumps? Here's what they're going to do next turn. I'm gonna pretend to support them, and then we'll both fuck them over. And then good old Hungary over here, he gets what he wants, and Germany gets what they want. But, you know, your friend Johnny, who's playing Russia, might never speak to you again because it's a dick move. So the point being here is that the game remains playable. It continues to play because you either play it with strangers and you don't care about whether you're going to be friends with them after. It's a competition game. Or you just fucking sit down with your friends and you have a conversation about being decent and not shitty to one another. Be like, look, if you say something, if you agree to do something, we agree there's no going back, right? All agreements are binding in this game. Or we try to put all of the shittiness in the game so that our friends can theoretically hate Austria-Hungary instead of me, right, as a person. We talk about these things beforehand in the same way we write a contract, even with our friends, because it creates a boundaried space. It creates a safe space for behavior, and we all agree that we're just playing a game. Even if I'm being shitty to you in the game, it's for fun. It's play. I still care about you as a person. We're still friends, right? I'm not going to be shitty to you outside the game. I'm not going to retaliate if you backstab me. I'm not going to, like, you know, not come to your birthday party because you betrayed me. You know, it's not like that. So if you can agree on that, you can all consent to some shitty behavior. And that's okay, right? So you can have this conversation before you start playing role-playing games. You can say, hey, so this is an RPG, and we all want to make a fun narrative together, and maybe we won't always agree, and maybe our characters will disagree, and we're going to use the game to, like, fight that out. Can we talk about ways we can do that that don't make us feel like we are hurting each other as people? You don't want to ruin your friendships just because of a role-playing game. Role-playing games are fucking important. Role-playing games are fun and important and cool, and you want to play them, and you want to get intense about them, but Jesus Christ, people are more important than RPGs. Which is a weird thing for me to say because I don't really like people generally, but your people, the people you care about and play games with, they're more important. So I'm going to tell you a little story about my experience. I have some actual experience with this, and I like to try to give concrete examples if it's at all possible. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you back many a year to the distant past of the year 1998. It was the year 1998, and I was around 15. And I was joining a new Dungeons & Dragons group at my high school. And little 15-year-old Adam didn't know these folks very well, right? I was coming into high school, out of middle school. I hadn't really gotten a lot of chance to play D&D with people who weren't already my friends or my relatives, like my brother or my cousin. And these kids were older than me. They were the cool kids. They were the kids that smoked weed and listened to metal. And I wanted so badly for these cool kids to like me and playing games with me. And, you know, I heard that their D&D game was the shit. I heard their D&D game was just the best D&D game in town. In the small town where there's probably like 4 D&D games, but whatever. A lot of what I learned about GMing came from playing in that group. Big ups to our GM, Pat Brown, wherever you are. And so Pat sat us all down, GM Mr. Brown, we all sat down, and he said to me at the beginning, he's like, all right, man, so if you're going to play this game with us, there's a lot of what we used to call PKing in this game, player killing. There's even a spot on the character sheet. They had taken the official D&D character sheet and whited out some useless thing, and they had replaced it with number of player kills that you got on your sheet. So this was like a mechanic in the game. This was a thing that we did. So, you know, we kept our alignments secret. We kept our hit points secret. We were all very, like, we had our own little GM screen. We would keep our sheets behind. Of course, you roll in public so the GM can see, but that's how it goes. So by the time our campaign ended, by the time I was coming up on 18, so like when I was 17, by the time we finished the campaign, many forgotten realms later, I had an enchanter strangled in his sleep, a bard thrown off a boat in the middle of the ocean, 2 clerics stabbed to death, and a fighter left to die in a gelatinous cube so they could take all my gear. Right? Now, those kills all happened from other characters. Other players, not the GM. These were kills. I got killed by the GM a bunch of times too, but the players, we fought each other a lot because it was a thing that came up. We liked that stuff. And I gave as good as I got, right? Kurt, I'm looking at you. I killed 2 of your barbarians. But the reason why it worked out is because we talked about it in advance, right? We had that conversation. It was just a thing that we did. Dr. Grigori is highly inspired by that campaign. Cleric of Cyric pretending to be a cleric of Shantea. Yeah, it was fun. So sometimes, though, you don't get to have this talk in advance. Sometimes you stumble into PvP. You realize, shit, this is an untenable solution. This is an issue where 2 players want diametrically opposed stuff, and it doesn't make sense to either of them to just back down. Maybe it snuck up on you. Maybe this is a surprise attack, so stop playing. I don't mean the campaign. I just mean just stop. Just put the rulebook down. I don't know. Go give everybody a 5-minute break. If you're like my 15-year-old D&D group, smoke a joint and just stop playing and come back and say, okay, so I can see this is getting heated, right? Are we feeling calm enough to work through it as friends and players, or do we need to stop and throw another Misfits record on and hang out and not do this now, right? Do we need to take a break? You're allowed. You can totally do that. So as the GM, this is often falling on us because we have distance from these things, and by all accounts, we should be neutral. We should be mediating these conflicts from a position of neutrality. Character conflict, I believe, should be resolved as a group, together, with everyone's voices involved in the conversation, if it's at all possible. I don't care about metagaming. Fuck immersion. We're people, we care about this thing we've made, and we don't want it all to come crashing down just because someone or someones are being obstinate with each other. So putting the brakes on can mean life or death for a campaign. So do that. Pump the brakes, slow things up, take a little break, take a longer break if you need it. Don't be scared to stop things where they are, and remind people that they're more important and the campaign is more important than the individual characters within it. And if they're both into the idea of sticking to their proverbial guns and letting the game do its job and resolve things, then by all means, let it. Play the game, adhere to the rules, adjudicate as fairly as you can. And remember, some games will help you and some games are going to make it more difficult. If you're playing Dungeon World, don't PvP each other, please, for the love of God. It gets so messy, so fast, and generally both parties just die miserable, which is kind of by design. If you fight each other, you die. It's kind of how it goes. But, as always, talking with your players as players, not letting people get away with the Nuremberg defensive gaming, trying to figure out a fun and exciting way to step back and take an authorial stance to say, let's talk about the game at large and our character's position in it. That can help you continue onward, even if someone's character loses their life and they have to make a new character. Because it's always easier to make a new character than it is to find a new player. Plus, hard feelings suck. You ostensibly want these people to be your friends. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't care. Maybe if they storm out, that's fine. But it sounds to me like Clayton wants to keep their group together. So, yeah, keep that in mind. And, you're going to learn as this stuff happens. You're going to learn who handles it in what way. And talking about it in advance helps, right? Like, I've had a few situations, and y'all can remember them, I'm sure, right? Prosper versus Higgs. Big one. If you watched Balance of Power, the most recent episode of The Dark Side, there's some stuff going on there that I'm going to need to deal with as a group. Burning Wheel, our Series 2 Burning Wheel, the last episode was basically all PvP. So Mage had a bunch of PvP. Some of these games helped me, some didn't, but in all of them, we took the time to talk about how we felt about the conflict that was occurring. And that's something you can do, yes you, to make your games smoother and less traumatizing when the great beast of PvP rears its head. So if that happens, if you get into a situation with PvP, maybe somebody dies, maybe they need to make a new character. I mean, people need to make new characters for lots of reasons, but it's really hard to bring them in, isn't it?
Hi Adam, this is Imagination. That's the handle I use for most things. And my question is about dealing with player character death, or more specifically what you do after that happens, when you've had a player go off and make up a new character and you want to introduce that character back into the existing party. I always feel like the ways I try to handle that come off as clunky or really contrived, and that can really pull players, and me as well, out of the game that we're trying to enjoy, and it can sometimes take a really long time to get back to the gameplay that we want to have. Any advice for dealing with that kind of situation?
I mean, I hope so. I sure hope so. So we all struggle with this, right? This is a hard thing to deal with in games because we, as consumers of the media, have become, let's say, expectant of verisimilitude, right? We become reliant on the idea that when we make a narrative using a role-playing game, that it all flows nicely together and nothing jarring ever occurs. We want to tell the story of the Fellowship of the Ring and how Sam and Frodo make the long journey to Mount Doom together, and while Boromir may fall to Orcish arrows, spoiler warning, it's not like Sam steps into a pit trap, takes 5d6 damage halfway through and dies, and then it's like, okay, well, Falco Chubb shows up, and Falco is now your BFF and carries you on to finish the job. It doesn't happen, right? We expect death to have meaning and new characters to flow into the narrative in a way that feels cinematic and real, right? Like they join the party in some significant event. And this is one way in which movies and TV and books are actually kind of not a good role model for tabletop RPGs, right? That's the price we pay for playing to find out what happens, because sometimes what happens is Sam fucking fails his poison save. So, you know, these things can be a challenge when we want to create the illusion of verisimilitude, or at least kind of like work our way around verisimilitude to replace a dead character. You know, I've said this. So this is the first thing that I would suggest, and I've said this before. This may be my favorite thing to tell people as GMs. Dying, which is to say, inflicting death on a character, is maybe the least interesting thing you can do to that character. Y'all have heard me say this before. You can get a lot more narrative mileage out of injury and sadness and woe and misery and darkness than you can out of, well, you died. Because death, most of the time, not always, but death is more often than not the terminus of a character's story. You don't really see a lot of games, Eclipse Phase, Wraith, I guess. Many, like, there are a few games that you get to see death as like another stage for your character, but not very many. You know, most of the time people are playing D&D and dying is just dying, and that's it. You're done. You make a new character. So you can fix this problem before you even get to it by considering playing a game that doesn't just off your character, right? That helps a lot. Most of my favorite role-playing games, it is very fucking difficult to die, right? Torchbearer, Blades in the Dark, Burning Wheel, Apocalypse World. Like, there's lots and lots of shit that will happen to you that is interesting and fun before you get to the death place, but death is there as a ripcord as a player to say, done. You know, we out. I'm okay with not playing this character anymore, right? So I look at death as being something that, depending on the game, is a player choice to make, not a GM thing to inflict. Now, that being said, I do like games. There are games that I like in which it is easy to die. I'm looking at you, everything based on basic D&D, right? All retro clones ever. tend to have characters that are pretty fragile. And the players will learn quickly, hopefully, that if they want to keep their characters, they avoid those situations. I get a lot of flack in running Stars Without Number, which is a very lethal game. You know, a single gunshot can kill you. I get a lot of flack for like not being deadly enough from people who expect a degree of OSR murdering in that game on the player side. But what's happened in Swansong is that the players have learned that getting into fights gets them killed, and so often try to find their way around them, or they only fight fights they can win. They fight dirty. They overpower their enemies, right? So the players have learned. We kind of move away from even the rules that are deadly and dangerous. So keep this in mind when you're trying to pick a game. When you want to know whether the game is going to make you do this a lot, look at how long character creation is. And if character creation is short, you probably don't have as much to worry about, right? It's not such a big deal. Death will happen. People can roll up new characters. You can immediately, as a GM, start to move away from that in your narrative, and you can figure that stuff out as you go, right? The more tedious the mechanical elements of character creation are, the more a dead character holds the game back, right? So think about this stuff. Forethought will go a long way in preparing you for dealing with this issue. And honestly, if you expect Demise to be around every corner, and the game does have kind of a long character creation process, Pathfinder, encourage players to throw together some spare characters, right? At character creation, right? So put together like 4 or 5 characters, and then just play one. And if they die, it's cool. You got 4 more characters. You're super excited to play. So do that. But that's not the question, right? The question is introduction. So as far as narrative goes, it can be really tricky to just drop someone in unless you're already playing a troop style game, right? Unless you're like, well, soldier 62714 is dead, so let's just return to base, rope in soldier 62716. We're good to go. 62715 was not worth it. He didn't make it through boot camp. It's fine. Honestly, don't try to shoehorn a new character into the game mid-session. Like, give yourself the rest of the session. Like, just, if a character dies, tell their player, like, sorry, man, like, it's a bummer you died and we still got 4 hours of game to go. Maybe, like, make your new character. Or, like, help me with rules stuff. Or look at your phone. Or go do something else, right? It's okay to not try to lure them in, because then it gives you all the way between sessions to talk about how you want to fix that. And this is where you can look to your narrative, right? I've solved introducing new characters into the game. So this ties in a lot. I'm going to give a couple of examples that are similar, but this ties in a lot to similar stuff that we talked about a few episodes ago about players missing sessions. You can do a lot of the same tricks. So I've solved this problem with the time stream of the universe being bent by an evil wizard. I've solved this with the psychic maelstrom damaging people's memories. You know, you can get creative about this in the narrative, but you can also just play a game that's about something bigger than the PCs, right? So if you want to use a trick like a time jump or eliding time or being like, you'll return back to town, spend a few months, and bolster the adventuring party with new members, give everybody a chance to do some montage shit and then introduce the new guy, right? That can be easy. Some games explicitly say change up the game, right? Some games say whoever died, you wait a session, and then maybe they can be the GM for a few sessions, right? Torchbearer does this, I think. So you can shift things around. Or you can just play games that are, like I said, about things that are bigger than the PCs so that a bunch of different PCs can fit in. Look to the narrative, right? If, I don't know, say like a planetary cult of French artificial intelligence worshippers is a big part of the game right now, encourage a player to replace their character with a fanatic soldier who works for the army of the planetary AI worshipping cult, right? If you want some cool advice about, or you want to see a cool narrative to take some examples from, check out a book or series of books. I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about this, but I really like the first book of The Black Company. The next couple of books are sort of whatever, but the first book is so good. And The Black Company is a fantasy campaign about several dozen player characters. It focuses on 5 or 6 of them at a time. It focuses on one predominantly. But if you want to see a cool narrative that handles bigger things than just an adventuring party, check it out. It's also just a good book. It's fun to read, and everyone in it is like the best kind of murder hobo. It's a great evil campaign. Black Company. Go check it out. I think you can enlist the help of your players too when you do this, right? Like, tell them to set aside their verisimilitude demands for a moment, right? Like, yes, the innate response is often to be like, fuck you, new guy. Fuck you, I don't trust you. You can't join my crew. Get the fuck out of here. But don't do that. That's wandering into Nuremberg territory. Find reasons to trust this character. Write bonds with them, right? Like, say, not only is this a new character, but like, oh, I know this guy. You know, we served together in Space Nom. Or, oh, this character is my character's wife's brother, right? This is my brother-in-law, and I'm giving him a chance on my spaceship, right? Like, work together about that background. Because I think that when a character enters a game that's already in play, you all have to work together to incorporate them in a way that feels smooth and natural and not so grindy and awful. And that's not just the GM's job. That's everybody's job. Share the hopes and dreams that this player has for the new character. Talk about their background. Talk about their affiliations. Fucking give up some of their secrets, because that's okay. That's an okay thing to do. And hook their character in. And you see this happening in... I mean, watch the Seven Samurai. Watch how the samurai all get together. Watch how that adventuring party forms, and then do that. Steal from Kurosawa. It's very good advice generally for GM stuff. If you give up a little of that GM power and you let the players Kurosawa their way into a party for you, you're all going to feel a lot better about what comes next, which is to say, returning to the game. And this is all advice I've got to give myself when we find a new character for Swan Song. So these kinds of questions help me as a GM too, because they remind me of what I think and feel about these things, right? They help me get back on track as a GM. So if you want to do me a big favor, and hopefully I can do you a big favor too, go to my website, www.adam-koble.com/office-hours, and fill out that form. Give me your questions, because they're going to get me thinking too, and hopefully I can answer them, and I can help you feel better at the table. So until next time, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for your questions, and we will see you on the next office hours. Bye, everybody.